Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. And we have not had a plethora of episodes this week because I went on an episode tangent. And I don't know, for about a month and a half or 2 months, we did something like 30 episodes, which is just a god-awful amount of episodes. Very blessed to be able to do that, but it takes a lot of work to do that amount of episodes in a very short amount of time. So we're taking a little bit of a snail's pace this week and probably next week. And next week is very exciting. We have our 300th episode next week. Suzanne and I will be on just chatting about the life of the podcast and the ups and downs of the podcast. So that'll be very exciting. But without further ado, I have a very special guest today, Trish Neal, and she is the president of the Alaska Association of Historical Preservation, which I think is a very important thing. It's oftentimes maybe one of the last things that we think about just during the day, right? We have soccer practices and hockey practices and trekking kids around to different schools and you name it. And then preserving historical buildings maybe not be top of that list, but I do think it's very important that we at least have a conversation about preserving our historical buildings, because once they're gone, folks. So Trish, welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for your invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm super excited you're here. So tell us a little bit about kind of, 30,000 foot view of what is the Alaska Association of Historic Preservation and what is your role with them?
Alaska Association for Historic Preservation, we've been around 42 years, so we've got a long track record. We've recently rebranded to Preservation Alaska. It's less of a mouthful, and it speaks more to what we do and who we are. A lot of similar organizations across the country have gone to shorten their name to Preservation something. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We work with various organizations who may not be a nonprofit to help them with historic preservation projects. We're currently the nonprofit umbrella for Friends of Nike Site Summit, or FONS as they're called. We recently worked with the Naknek Cannery History Project on that huge project that kind of grew from one little thing to a great exhibit at the State Museum. And we work with others, and we love working with others to help with historic preservation. And I'm the president of the organization.
Nice. So, my guess is you are a big fan of preserving things here in Alaska, or you probably wouldn't be in your role that you are today. So why should we care about preserving our history? It seems like a no-brainer, right, for folks that care about this kind of stuff. But like I said before, a lot of people are busy. They got businesses they're running, that families that they're running. This is something that maybe it's not that they don't necessarily care about it, but they're just not really thinking about it. Why is it important for you and your group that, we preserve our history?
Oh, I love history, and that goes along with historic buildings. I grew up loving history and doing road trips to different places and visiting the historic places and learning more about the area. I've even made trips to cemeteries to take pictures of grave sites for people who can't make it there, and shoot pictures and send them to them. So you've got to be crazy if you're walking cemeteries. But you can learn a lot from visiting historic sites. And this state has so much history in it. Everywhere you go, there's something with Alaska history. And if you don't know where you've been, it's kind of hard to figure out where you're going. And not to mention that preserving history and historic buildings is good for the local economy. I mean, it creates jobs. It brings people to the community. They spend money. So all in all, it's a good thing.
So, you know, what's unique about Alaska when it comes to history? I think that, let's say if we are in, Rhode Island or Vermont, you're kind of preserving history that is the fence around your block is very small as compared to Alaska. We have a very large state, obviously, that stretches almost the entire length of the United States and is almost as tall as the United States. So, what is it about what is unique about Alaska when it comes to trying to preserve our history? As you're the subject matter expert, one of them in the state. What's unique about it?
And that's a huge topic. I think it all depends on what you're interested in. Alaska Native history, the gold rushes, the Russian occupation and the churches that they founded, the fishing industry that brought Chinese, Japanese, and Filipino people to the canneries. Maybe it's the U.S. purchase of Alaska and the influx of government officials. I thought that was pretty interesting. That some of the officials that ended up here were exiled here. They didn't come on their own. They were sent here to get rid of them. It's if you look at the number of books that on Alaska's history that are written since the early 1800s. The state has always been a mysterious, faraway place that people dream about coming to visit. And that's still true today. It's just we definitely have an earlier, a more recent history than the rest of the United States because the Pilgrims came clear back, and discovering Alaska was more recent than that.
So, let's talk a little bit about some practicalness because I think most people can get on board with yes, let's put stuff in some museums and let's make it accessible and when most people think about preserving stuff, they really think about museums. I would say the average person, but I think it goes a little deeper than that. So let's old buildings, totem poles, some of these things in Alaska where we just we only have so many old buildings in Anchorage, for example. Why are those in particular important to preserve?
I am the first to acknowledge that not everything, every building, totem pole, boat, whatever can be saved. There aren't a lot of miracles around, but I'm the first, and we're the first ones to stand up for a building that we know can be saved and should be saved, and that's what hurts the most is that our inability to save the building, save our treasures, because the owners don't have a vision and no desire to spend the money to save the building. And unfortunately, we personally, as an organization, don't have the money that's needed to fight to save the buildings. It's a lot of people equate that with a money issue rather than saving a building. If you look around the country, there's millions being spent on restoration of historic buildings. And granted, it's not done overnight. It happens in phases, but many of those buildings are being renovated and repurposed and given new life rather than tearing it down and hauling it all to the landfill. So, and people appreciate that. They come to communities, like Juneau, Fairbanks, Skagway. Look what they have done about restoring their historic buildings and created a destination. And, so that is good for the economy, both for jobs and visitors coming to spend money and stay a while. We have a great place here that just did a repurpose of building, Whiskey and Ramen, with their engineer and their architect and the contractor. They repurposed the building into a beautiful place for the restaurant. And, they chose to have a vision of restoration and repurposing rather than tearing it down and starting over.
So what you're telling me is there's an opportunity for folks who maybe own some of these places around the state of Alaska. It's not like they become walled off buildings that nobody can touch. There's people that are around the state that are able to turn these into lucrative businesses by way of preserving the building.
Yeah, there's different theaters that have been renovated and repurposed. And like you say, once it's gone, it's gone. And there's, you can't. Some people have suggested, well, we'll just rebuild it, and it's not the same. It can look the same, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the history part of it. It took the demolition of Penn Station in New York City for people to realize what they had just done. And that was kind of the start of the historic preservation movement way back then. And for Anchorage and Alaska, I think the demolition of Fourth Avenue Theater is our Penn State movement. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. Once it's gone, it's gone. And it was a great building. And, and there's other great buildings around the state that need to be saved in some fashion, whether it's, repurposing it or restoring it and using it for residential, things like that.
And there's people probably all over the US that are doing this successfully and have some, blueprints on how to go about this, how to preserve a building, how to still preserve it while making money.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different places across the country. It's a trend. You've got the trend now towards multiple story buildings is to create, living quarters upstairs. And that is, rather than building, apartment buildings, it's restoring or renovating the upstairs. Sometimes it's a matter of getting, an elevator or some way of moving people upstairs rather than just using all the stairs. That's been kind of a thing. And, getting people to think more of living downtown than on the outskirts. So it's a great trend going across the country.
Nice. So my guess is you probably know a little bit more about history than the average person here in Alaska. So share with me maybe one of your favorite historical moments or facts or stories about Alaska.
Oh, my personal favorite is the woman from Minnesota who went to Wrangell, 1906, and bought a garnet mine at the mouth of the Stickeen River, and went back to Minnesota and dazzled her friends with all these garnets and got them to invest in the company. And so they went on to become a lucrative garnet mine operation there, hauling garnets down to the river and shipping it south, and making jewelry. They were in at least 2 world fairs with their garnets. And the interesting thing about it was that no men were going to be allowed in that company. But they did have men doing the work at the mine. And Anna Durkee went on to become a mining woman in her own right. And I spent almost 40 years researching women, because it's hard to find information in old newspapers unless you were the axe murderer. But I eventually found everybody. And Pat Rappel, fellow historian and author, would chuckle because I was still on the trail. And she had given up because you just couldn't find the women. And it wasn't until one of her relatives actually found me online and let me know who it was and how to find some of the information, that it took off. And that's why I still post stuff online to hopefully find more relatives. And I've actually met some of the relatives of these women. There was about 28 women altogether.
So tell me about how somebody could, you're going to get folks listening in and they're going to say, just that story was awesome. They want to hear more about that story. They want to maybe help you in your preservation efforts or get involved in your organization. Tell me how somebody can find you, and maybe what are some of the things that somebody could help out with as an initial thing. Maybe you guys have a fundraiser coming up. Tell us all about it.
We're online. We have a website, alaskapreservation.org. We also have a sister site called savingplacesalaska.com, which is where I post all of our Historic Preservation Month information. And we'll be spending the entire month of May statewide celebrating Historic Preservation Month. It's an event that goes across the country. You can find us on Facebook at Alaska Historic Preservation, or you can send us an email, akpreservation@gmail.com, or you can call us at 907-929-9870. And if you love history, we'd love to talk to you about joining up. Right now, we've got a call out for nominations for our 10 most endangered historic properties. So, and anyone can make that nomination. If you have a building in your community that you're concerned about, let us know about it.
And you do have some historical house museums, right, in Alaska? Tell us about those real quick.
Yeah, we actually manage the Oscar Anderson House for the Muni, and we've been doing that for over 10 years now. And it's a really cool place. The Oscar Anderson family lived there. It's set up to where it looks like they just left for run an errand and we're visiting. And that's one of the few historic houses, but there's some in Juneau, there's some in Fairbanks, and of course you've got the buildings in Skagway too. So I think there's several that it's on the National Register, and it's also the National Trust designated destination. So we have a little extra title.
So ain't nobody coming down to bulldoze that one. They'd probably get in trouble if they did that.
Well, the Muni would be, because the Muni owns it.
Well, any last minute things before we head off here that you wanted to talk about?
No, not really. I'm thrilled that we're doing the work that we are doing. It's my love, and it is a labor of love. That I live and breathe that, and I'm proud that we have a strong board to do that. But we need help. It takes a lot of people to do this work, and we're not getting any younger, so we need younger blood, like most organizations.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Must Read Alaska show. And conservatives that are listening, we should be the best stewards of history out there. We went nuts when people were tearing down statues, so let's keep all those historical things in Alaska and not torn down. And so if history is something that you're excited about, I want to encourage you to go look up on the website. I'll put the website in the description here. Go look up the stuff that this organization is doing. And if you can help out, you can help out. Trish, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime. And until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska.